Howdy, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we discuss fundraising in the religious sector and how generosity and giving impacts both the organization and the donor. From campus ministries to high schools, from universities and faith-based nonprofits to Catholic parishes, we bring you stories, insights, and best practices that will inspire, educate, and inform you to go out and raise more money for your ministry and the kingdom. God bless, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, howdy everyone, and welcome back to the Petrus Development Show. My name is Ren Hain from Petrus Development, and joining me today is the big guy, Mr. Andrew Robison, owner and president of Petrus. Hello, Andrew.
Howdy, Ren. Doing all right. How about yourself?
Living the dream. It's all good.
There you go. It's got to be, I guess we're after spring, right? Or we're technically in spring now?
Speak for yourself, man.
Well, according to the seasons, according to the almanac, we're technically in spring, right? March 21, is that the spring start date?
I guess that's true. I see nice green leaves behind you, and I know it's
Yes.
April, but it's literally a snowstorm outside my window right now.
Yeah, it's not a snowstorm here. In fact, my wife can attest to it being spring because the pollen always gets her. So she has winter, and then she has Zyrtec season or Claritin season, whatever she's taken that year. And we went out the other day, and we went for a hike, and she after 30 seconds in, she said, "Oh, I forgot to take my allergy medicine." I said, "Well, sorry."
There's no pollen and no bugs when there's 12 inches of fresh snow outside.
That's true. Yeah, there's something to
enjoy
be said
that.
for that. Yeah. Hey, you got a new picture on your wall, huh?
Oh, that's right. It's not really new. It's a picture of the Centennial Mine, which is a copper mine just up the road from us here. I live in what's known as the copper country of Michigan. Lots of copper mines around here. It's kind of the artist did some kind of colorization to it, but it's one that hung in the microbrewery in town here all through my college years, and then when my wife and I got married, they bought it for us and gave it to us.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
Picture, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah,
I like it. Kind of a little taste of the upper Michigan here. And you have go ahead.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's great. So I love it.
You have a picture hanging behind you.
Yeah.
That several people have asked me, what is that picture there?
Let me see.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see these live here.
Yeah. So that is the Dome of St. Peter's in Rome, which another plug for another podcast of ours is Holy Donors. We did a season on George W. Strake, season 4, season 5. But his generosity, his philanthropy led to the discovery of St. Peter's bones underneath this dome in St. Peter's in Rome. So, but this picture was, so a friend of mine, let me see if I can get this right. My friend is David. David's father is Randy, Dr. Light. And Dr. Light, and we've become friends over the years, he is a very gifted photographer, and he's retired, and so now he spends a lot of time taking photographs of churches and wildlife, and he's gotten really into astrophotography. So they go out to West Texas all the time for these star festivals and takes pictures. But when I moved into this office, this picture was on the floor because it had been in the hall, or he had sort of outfitted the entire office. And so I asked the previous owner, "Are you going to take that picture?" And he said, "No, I've got more of Dr. Light's pictures in my new office." And I asked Dr. Light, I said, "You want this back?" And he said, "No, I've got plenty of pictures to keep it." So I was the beneficiary of his generosity and his skill. And yeah, so that is the Dome of St. Peter's in Rome. And I don't know if you can see over here. Oh gosh, it's in the way. Can you see that little picture there?
Oh yeah, it's a little bit of glare, but that's all right.
Sorry,
flower.
That is the Texas bluebonnet, and that is a watercolor. Another member of the church, St. Mary's at Texas A&M, was a gifted artist in a different way. And she did watercolors, and she did a number of watercolors. And this is a print of her Texas bluebonnet. So I've got two of the geographic loves of my life. I need a picture of Colorado or Wyoming somewhere in here, the mountains. But I've got Rome and I've got Texas. So I'm in good company.
Love it. Excellent. Well, it's a beautiful church, obviously in the photo, well-known church. I want to talk about another beautiful church, kind of while we're on the topic, segue here. I want to talk about the beautiful new church at Oklahoma State University's campus ministry,
Yeah.
St. John's. I know probably 5, 6 years ago, the Father Carey there realized they had some changes going on. They realized they needed a new church, and they called up Petrus and talked about doing a campaign to build a new church. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Sure. So the present day, they just celebrated their 1 year anniversary of the dedication of the new church. It's beautiful. It's in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's a beautiful church. It's a beautiful student center. It's got a great tower. I believe it's now the tallest structure on campus, which is pretty cool. And they, pack it every Sunday for mass. But you're right. Backing up to 2019, they were in a very different position. There's two parishes in Stillwater. One was the quote family parish, St. Francis, and one was the student parish, which was St. John's. But there had been a lot of kind of commingling and crossover. And so Father Carey and Father Brian, they got together and they talked with the bishop and they said, we really need this to be a student parish. And so they went through a very, not a difficult process, but an intentional process to get to transition all of the families that were attending and all of the adults, the non-students, non-faculty that were attending St. John's to actually transition over to St. Francis. And, it was it all worked out in the end, but as some of those transitions go, there was a little bit of, there was some consequences and some unintended consequences. But one of the consequences they were aware of is, well, these these non-students are financially supporting St. John's, and so when they all move over to St. Francis, they're not going to be supporting us financially. And so they basically, in a very short window of time, lost almost all of their fundraising, and they really had to shift gears quickly. Matt Bond was the development director there, and Father Carey Wakulis, like you mentioned, they had to shift gears to a more of a university style fundraising, raising money from the alumni, which they had not done previously. And so that was the phase that they were in when they reached out to us and they said, we need to build this, we need to build a new church. The church that we're in is old, it's too small, it's not serving the needs of the campus anymore. And can you help us? And so we were able to help them. It was a fun project. Father Carey, if you've ever met him, or if you don't even have to meet him, you can just follow him online on Instagram. He's a riot. He's a really great guy. He's got his own podcast, Pastors of Payne County, I think, and just a lot of life in him, and a love for the church and a love for the students. And he and Matt Bond, it was a fun project to work on with. And so what we had to do with them was build their database, reconnect with alumni, build up their annual fund, go find major gift prospects for the campaign, ask for those gifts for the campaign, and then ultimately sort of go public and then backfill with a lot of gifts from everybody that we could find. And so they ended up raising, gosh, $27+ million. It was a successful campaign, and now their annual fund is going really well because they were able to have success in the campaign, reconnect with a lot of alumni, and so who are now continuing to support. So
Excellent.
great project, great success for them, and really pleased to see the results of that.
Well, it's a little sneak peek. Mr. Matt Bond will be joining us in our next episode of the Petrus Development Show, so stay tuned for
Very
that.
good.
But today we're talking about campaigns. I want to start just with that little story of a campaign that Petrus has helped with and how that all went. And you can go check out online just the beautiful results of that church building. I worked on a campaign years ago, and before I started it, my naive impression was that, we're doing a campaign, we'll just start asking people for gifts to a specific project that gives us something easy to talk about with them, and it won't be much different than our day-to-day operations of fundraising. And I was wrong about that. There was a lot more to it than just asking for a specific project. So there is kind of a science to campaigns, a process to them. Just to get us started, broadly speaking, what is a capital campaign, and what is generally involved in one?
Sure. So a capital campaign is raising a specific amount of money for a specific purpose within a specific time frame. So if you think about it in that, what we do every year, every month in fundraising, it might be project based, but those are a lot of times what we're doing is we're asking for unrestricted funds for the ministry, right, or the organization. And so you might have, a scholarship drive, or you might do something short. But when you are talking about a capital campaign, it's really a a um, a goal of a specific amount, right, which is generally larger than what you're raising normally, for a specific project, which is a need. And in most cases, you want that need to be growth focused or future focused, and within a specific time frame. And the time frame, I think we're going to talk about it later, but usually campaigns fall into like a 6 month to an 18-month time window. I've seen them shorter, I've seen them longer, but that's generally speaking what a capital campaign is.
So why would you do a campaign compared to just asking for gifts toward a specific project in the course of your normal fundraising?
Yeah, so campaigns, why you would do it is because it's an exciting story to tell your donors and your prospective donors. So, like I was saying, usually the goal or the outcome of a capital campaign is growth focused. And so, whenever I worked at the Texas A&M Foundation, we were doing we're doing a $2 billion capital campaign across the university, which is just an astronomical amount of money. But it lasted 7 or 8 years. But my boss at the time, he used to say a capital campaign is nothing but um, a really intense marketing effort. So capital campaigns, just by virtue of, like you said, you announce to everybody we're doing a capital campaign, and all of a sudden the checks show up and the money comes in. That's not the way it works. It still requires the effort of raising money. It still requires a strategy, but the capital campaign itself gives you a message to tell your donors that you are growing, you are expanding, you're entering into new areas. Whatever the goal of the campaign is, the desired outcome, it allows you to tell that story and to tell it to your existing audience and then also new audiences. So that's why you would do a capital campaign. Some organizations do it purely because they have a need. So, like at Oklahoma State, their church was too small, too old, and it wasn't serving the needs. And they needed a new church and student center. So that was their need. But we've also seen nonprofits that will do an endowment campaign. So that's a campaign that's specifically to raise money to begin or launch or grow their endowment, which is a future focus. We want to plan for the future. We want to plan for permanency. You can do staffing. So, we're an organization with 4 full-time staff and 100 volunteers, and we recognize that in order to grow, we need to have 30 staff and 300 volunteers, and that's going to take a lot of capital. And so you might do a capital campaign to raise money to expand your staff in a dramatic way. So you can do the goal of the camp, or the kind of what you're raising money for, can change, but it really is an effort to tell your donors, hey, we are growing, we're doing more, and you can be part of making this a success.
Right. So most people, I think, when they first think of a capital campaign, they think of a building project, right? But it's
Correct.
not necessarily just that. It can go far
Yeah.
beyond that.
Yeah, so you think of capital, and in the fundraising world, we think of capital as building, right? Like structures, like you're saying. In the for-profit world, when they're raising money, when you use the word capital, that just basically means cash to use, an influx of cash to use for some startup or some expansion. And so why capital in the nonprofit world has kind of latched itself onto buildings and structures, I don't really know. It's probably just historical. But capital campaign is really just, we want to raise a lot of money so we can use it to invest in the future. This conference is well worth the entire experience, especially for the faithful looking to build the body of Christ. That's what one ministry director said after attending the Petrus Development's Raise conference in 2023. A fundraising staff member from a different organization had this to say: I have several years of experience fundraising, and I found the conference applicable to me. I also saw new to fundraising people getting a lot out of it too. There is literally something for everyone here. In 2024, Raise, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, will be even bigger and even better. Join us on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, June 24 through 26, 2024. Raise 24 will feature outstanding speakers, great networking opportunities, and an authentically Catholic conference experience. Registration is open now. Learn more at petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24.
Great. So you've thrown out some big numbers here. We've talked about $25 million, $27 million campaign at Oklahoma State, $2 billion campaign at Texas A&M. How do you determine what a reasonable amount is for a capital campaign? Are there typical ranges? How do you even determine that for your organization?
Yeah, so it really starts with the need. So you talked about you were part of a campaign when you were at Michigan Tech, right? And so the need there was you had some physical space needs, some renovations, some expansion. You also had some endowment needs, right? You wanted to build for permanency, and in order to kind of look at the fundraising in a more holistic way, we also included your annual fund because father wanted to add some staff and wanted to fundraise for the annual fund and their operations in there. And so when you looked at all those needs, then that gave us an idea, a range of what that target fundraising goal is. We then went through a process to do a feasibility study. So feasibility study, are we going to talk about that now, later, or now, or?
Sure. Yeah, let's dig into
Yeah,
that.
great, sure. So a feasibility study basically is a process that you go through to solicit feedback from your constituents, so your donors, your prospective donors, about the project, about what feedback they would give for the project, and to get a sense of who would support it if it moved forward and at what level they would support. So feasibility study, usually the way that we do them at Petrus, takes somewhere around 4 months. Some can be quicker, some can be longer, but we'll go out, we'll help create a case for support. So what is that? Kind of why would people support it? What are the needs? Identify the list, do some prospect screening, and then actually do the interviews, anywhere from 60 to 100 interviews, and kind of we've gone either side of that. But really, we're looking for feedback from your prospects. And so one of my favorite stories that I tell all of when I'm talking about feasibility study is actually about your project, Ren. And it was, when we were looking at, here's all the needs that we could have. It was, there was kind of a laundry list of physical needs within the building. And one of them was a new balcony. Do you remember this?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So father, they needed more space in the sanctuary. They're filling out. And one of the ideas that had been floated was there's a balcony, but we could extend the balcony about 10 or 15 feet. It would add about 10 or 15 seats, and it would cost around $100,000 just because of the structure and the design and the engineering and all that. And so when we would, in the interviews and feasibility study interviews, I would, sort of talk about all these things, and everybody would say, I love this part. I love this part. I love this part. What, tell me about this balcony. And so I would tell them, and they were like, don't do the balcony. That's too much money. It's not neat. We don't like the way it's going to crowd the sanctuary. And so at the end of the study, when we were giving the report and the results to Father Ben, we said, everybody loves all these things. Nobody likes the balcony. And he said, okay, well, then we just won't do the balcony. We'll find other ways to get more seats in there. And so it really is a feedback process that, people might not, if Father had gone and asked those people, what do you think about a balcony? They might have all said, Father, you're brilliant. I love it. Do it. Go to the balcony. But given sort of honest feedback, a chance to provide honest feedback to somebody that's not Father, they said, yeah, balcony is not a good idea.
Yeah, that neutral third party doing those interviews is key to getting honest results there.
Correct. So, but when you added up everything that was on that list, including the balcony, I think we tested a $5 million goal. And after the feasibility study, we realized $5 million is a little bit of a reach. I think we could do more in the $2.5 to $3 million range, I believe, is the results that we had.
Yep, right in there.
Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yeah. So then, this is many years ago. We've done a lot of campaigns, so apologize if I'm mixing up the numbers, but I think we're right. $2.5 to $3 million. And so then what Father and the building committee and the leadership council had to do is they said, all right, if that's what we can raise within the time of our campaign, we need to scale back our fundraising goal, scale back what we would use that money for to something that's more realistic, because we want to hit the goal. That's kind of a high priority is to hit the goal. You want to show success. And so I don't remember if was I in Michigan, or was it a text group thread that somehow we were like, 3.3 or 3.1 or 3.2 would be a really good number. And Do you remember that, Ren? Do you remember how it all kind of happened?
Yeah, well, some background there. Michigan Tech is an all science and engineering school. So we
Yeah,
were trying to find something that would speak to that group of people, right? Those
they're
alumni.
all really proud super nerds, right?
Exactly. And I think it
Yes.
was you that said, we should just take number pi and multiply it by a million. And we said, that is genius. No other options on the table now. That's what it's going to be. So the
Yeah.
campaign ended up at 3.14159265 million because of
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah, and that gave a fun story for father to tell. It, kind of helped with the marketing. Allowed people, some people even made like really weird gift amounts, right, based on that. But that was how we came up with the goal for you. Was we said, what are all the needs, and that adds up to this much, 5 million. We did a feasibility study process. We tested that. It came back with 5 million is a stretch, but we believe that $2.5 to $3 million is a reasonable goal. And then, sort of in the process of that, assigning a final goal total, we kind of had some fun in going with this pi number, but it fit just outside of the range, but really close to. And so that's how that was how we set the goal for Michigan Tech. At Oklahoma State, we did a similar process. They identified the needs, added up to the cost to do a building. We did a study. The study said, here's how much you can raise. And they actually blew that number out. We were surprised they were able to get some big gifts from some people that we weren't expecting at the time, but we're really happy to get. And so that's how they ended up raising 27 million. Arkansas, campus ministry there was a similar project, similar type of project. Identified the building needs, put in some staff upgrades, put in some endowment, and then did a study, and then tested the goal, and then set a final goal. So generally speaking, that's a good process to go through, and that's kind of how we run most campaigns. You know the verse from chapter 14 of the Gospel of Luke that says, "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it?" If your organization is contemplating a capital campaign to raise money for any type of project, it is essential that you carry out a feasibility study by a neutral third party first. A feasibility study determines the level of interest your donors have in the project, the potential level at which they might provide financial support, and who might serve as volunteer leaders of the effort. The feasibility study process will also help to excite your prospects about the potential of a campaign. If your organization needs to carry out a feasibility study, Petrus can help. To learn more about what's involved, check out petrusdevelopment.com/study. petrusdevelopment.com/study.
Great. So I mentioned there's kind of a process, a typical process to campaigns. Starts with a feasibility study, usually for a
Yeah.
successful campaign. Can you talk about the other steps in the process of a capital campaign?
Sure. So after a feasibility study, you kind of move into this preparation phase. And the preparation phase for some groups, depending on the results of the study, it can be a week, right? Or it can be, hey, the study told us, we need to change our goal dramatically, so we're going to, shift plans, and it's going to take us some time to do that. But the preparation phase is kind of getting your messaging together, getting your case for support ready, start designing the timeline for the campaign, and you really kind of start diving into the strategy that you're going to go about to raise the money. So that's the preparation phase. Once you feel, yeah, we're ready, we know the story, we can start talking to donors, then you enter into you enter into what's called the silent phase. The silent phase is really about securing your capital campaign committee and securing your leadership gifts. Your leadership gifts could be your top 15 donors. They could be your top 100 donors. But those are very targeted solicitations, very targeted invitations to give leadership level gifts to the capital campaign. And that's so you're not putting it on your website, you're not talking about it publicly, but you're kind of identifying people that have a high capacity and a high inclination to support, and you go and you ask them for a gift. So that'd be the silent phase. So during the silent phase, you're also doing things like, if you're going to have a campaign video, you're shooting the campaign video. If you're going to have a website, you're getting the website ready. The case for support, you're designing that. So you're putting some of those finishing touches on all the pieces of the capital campaign. And then you have a kickoff event where you go public. That's where everybody that has ever heard of your organization, or might ever hear of your organization, or might ever know somebody who knows somebody who might hear of your organization, should know that you're doing a capital campaign. So that's the public phase. It's very event driven. You use direct mail, you use website, you use online giving, and it's really about casting the net as wide as you can to engage as many people in supporting the capital campaign. That'd be the public phase. Ideally, at the end of the public phase, you've hit your goal, you celebrate, and then you enter into kind of a phase that I know other fundraising firms do this. I feel like this is something, though, that Petrus really spends a lot of time and energy in focusing on um, because we believe in creating sustainable fundraising. And this is the last phase, which is your wrap up or your transition phase. So a good campaign is only successful if it does two things: if it raises the amount of money that you need to accomplish the goal that you set out for in the campaign, and if it positions you to have a stronger and a more sustainable annual fund post campaign. And so the transition phase is really important then to that. How you might have, 1,000 brand new donors who've never given to the organization before, but they supported the capital campaign. Well, now we want to engage as many of those 1,000 in our annual fund after the campaign to help with operations, to help with sustainability. And there are some strategies that can improve improve the likelihood that will happen. And so that's the transition phase. So those will be the four: is your feasibility study that kind of leads into your preparation phase, then your silent phase, then your public phase, and then your transition phase at the end.
Great. So that's a common worry that comes up when I talk to people about starting a campaign, is that after the campaign, everybody's going to stop giving to them because they gave so
Yeah.
much for the campaign. But you're saying that shouldn't or doesn't have to be the case.
Yeah, it depends on the organization, right? So I know that dioceses that do capital campaigns, a lot of times they will see a drop in the collections. They will see a drop in stewardship drives after the campaign, because people are, in many cases, the parishioners are sort of refocusing their Sunday offering, or at least a portion of it, towards the diocesan campaign. And so if you know that going into it, then you can plan for that. Other organizations, though, schools, campus ministries, nonprofit organizations, that's not always the case, right? Some people it will be, right? They might say, "Hey, I'm already an annual fund donor. I give $1,000 a year, so I can do $2,500 a year, and that thousand is sort of included in that." But most of your campaign donors are not sort of robbing from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. They're giving to the capital campaign, and then after the campaign is over for the annual fund, they still are likely and interested and passionate about the organization, such that they will continue to give. Right? It does take some work, it takes some messaging, but that's not always it's more often the case that your annual fund and your operational giving will increase after a campaign than it will decrease, in my experience.
Great. So let's say you're an organization who sees a need coming down the road, or wants to kind of take the next step forward in their fundraising and in their offerings, their impact that they're making. How do they know if they're ready for a campaign? Are there any kind of benchmarks for preparedness?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways to look at this. One, you can look at this as, I want my fundraising program to be strong. I want our annual fund to be strong. And I'm going to set some metrics that once we hit these metrics, then I know, yes, I'm ready to go into a capital campaign. Um, be, and that's one way to look at it, right? And that's not a wrong way to look at it. In fact, early on, that's how I viewed every capital campaign: is you have to have a strong annual fund, and you have to go into your capital campaign kind of with a lot of momentum and a lot of strength. And that will set you up for success. And then afterwards, you can, because you have got a ready-made kind of pool, you've got monthly donors, you've got annual fund, you've got major gift prospects, and now you're just asking them for a campaign gift. But I have worked with a lot of organizations over the last 7-8 years being with Petrus, that are not in a place of, their annual fund is not at peak performance, and yet the need arises for them to do a capital campaign, and we have actually used the campaign to to increase their annual support after the campaign is over. So going back to Oklahoma State, we talked about them at the beginning. That's a perfect example. We grew, they grew their database, their list of donors so much through the course of the campaign, that when the campaign was over, they had virtually no annual fund going into the campaign. The campaign was, a targeted effort to raise the money for this church. And then after the campaign, they were able to transition so many of those donors into annual fund that now their annual fund is strong, whereas before it was virtually non-existent, or not existent. It was not where it should have been for them to do a campaign. So it is possible to go at it both ways, right? This campaign readiness is less about what are the financial markers that your fundraising program is doing right now, and it's more about, do you have the project in mind? Are you clear about the costs? Um, do you have the team, the fundraising team, whether that's staff and that's volunteers, and your leader, your executive director, your pastor, your chaplain? All of those are going to be very critical. Are they invested in this, and do they see it as a need? And do you have can you recruit the fundraising, the leadership level donors, and the fundraising volunteer group, the committee that's going to help propel you to success? So if you feel like you can do those things, then kind of where the financial level that your fundraising program is at pre-campaign is less important than, do you have a plan, do you have a story to tell, and can you put together the team that's going to go out and execute?
So you mentioned some of those team members. You mentioned some of the committee, some of the volunteers, the staff. Who are kind of the main stakeholders or team members you do need to kind of collect and have work together for a campaign to be successful?
Yeah, so it starts at the top. You really want a leader who believes that this is the highest priority for him or her for the next 12 to 18 months, or however long the campaign is going to go. I've worked with too many groups that the leader says, we need to do a capital campaign, and my development director, our consultant, and the volunteers are going to handle it, and to call me when it's over. And ultimately, those campaigns really struggle. So the leader really, it does start with him or her believing this is the most important project for me and my time over the next 12 to 18 months. And if that means that they have to bring in some support to help with the operation, to help with the management, to help with the administration of the organization in the meantime, while they're spending more time focused on fundraising, then that is ultimately going to create a more successful campaign than for them to say, I can do 20% of my time on the campaign because I have to run all the programming and operations. You look at university presidents right now, and it's 70% of their time is fundraising now, and they have teams of people that handle the academics, the all the other parts of the university, because their presence with some of their highest level donors is so critical that if they're not involved, their donors they're like, well, I got 16 other charities that I could give to. If he or she is not going to show up and be willing to meet with me, then I'm going to go down the list. So it starts at the top. After that, you really do need a dedicated fundraising person. So ideally, that's a full-time staff member. But situations are, kind of, you can make it work in a lot of different varieties and structures. But ideally, a full-time fundraiser, because it is going to take a lot of time, and there's a lot of coordination, whether that's volunteers, database, annual fund, or direct mail. All of those pieces, they all have to be managed, and it's, if you don't have one person that's their job, then it's really going to struggle. So that's the kind of second person that they need, is a dedicated fundraising person. Beyond that, the fundraising staff can be, depending on the size of the campaign, depending on the structure of the organization, can be large, it can be small, but you're going to look for people that can manage, major gifts, they can manage communications, they can manage the database, and all of those are going to make your campaign more successful, but they're not critical to success. Okay. Um, After staff, then you start looking at volunteers. So, who are your most committed volunteers, and who are your people that you can bring in that have um, interest, that have affinity, and that have a linkage to your organization. And if you can put together a team of volunteers that can help to broaden the pool of ultimate donors, then you're going to be more successful as well. Now it takes management to help them, because they're volunteers, right? Very busy lives. This is sort of a slice of what they're doing right now. And so you have to manage them and manage expectations and support. But if you can do that correctly, then they can be really successful. And then the third, I guess, sort of leg of the stool, right? So if you're looking at a stool, you've got staff, you've got your volunteers. The third leg of the stool is who are the experts who have done capital campaigns over and over and over again, who know the process, who can help to develop the strategy that can keep everybody accountable and provide guidance. And that's the fundraising consultant. And so that's what Petrus does. We work with a lot of organizations on capital campaigns, and really those are our kind of goals. How can we provide the strategy? How can we provide the accountability? And how can we provide the expertise that when you develop the plan, and inevitably something is going to, there's a wrinkle that's going to show up in the plan. And when you have a fundraising consultant, somebody that's done this over and over and over again, then those wrinkles seem less scary than they do if this is your first time ever. And so, we do a lot of, all right, well, that didn't go like we wanted to, but we're going to shift and we're going to, still tackle this project in a different way. So the three legs of the stool would be your staff, your committees, your volunteers, and then your campaign council, your experts.
Great. Great. So if you're an organization who's considering doing a campaign, you think you have some of the pieces in place, you have this need, what are the first steps you should take in getting ready and getting the process rolling?
Yeah. So, we talked about a feasibility study. That a feasibility study is um, part of one of the first steps, the actual kind of first executable first steps that you want to do. But even before a feasibility study, and a lot of times organizations call us and say we want to do a feasibility study, and then we start asking, drilling down, and there's some work that needs to be done. So we help them in this. But if you can do some of this stuff ahead of time, you're going to speed the process up. And really, what you need to identify is what is your project. What are your needs? So, do you need a new building? Do you need a new space? All right, what does that look like? What's the cost for that? What's the timing that you can build? Do you have land? Do all of those kind of specific pieces of it? You want to figure out what's your project. If it's not a building and it's staffing, what's staffing going to cost you? If it's endowment, what are your needs and long term? So you identify your needs. So you kind of start to put together what is your case for support is ultimately what you're looking for. The next piece of it is your database. Every person that you can add, every contact that you can add to your database before a campaign is going to position you for more success during the campaign. So becoming obsessive about growing your database, about adding new names before a campaign, it's just going to make the process better. So that would be the second thing is what can you do to get ready is to start building your campaign. And then I would say the next thing, and Matt Bond, you can ask him about this when you interview him for the next episode. He did this really well in that he started meeting with all of his top donors, him and Father Carey. And even before the campaign was, an idea, he made it a priority to go and start building relationships with those top benefactors to the organization. And that paid off in spades for them when the campaign started because they felt like insiders. And they had a relationship already well enough with Matt and with Father that when it was time for the campaign, they were kind of like, Father, aren't you going to come ask me for this campaign that you've been talking about to me for so long? And, so like had those relationships that were strong enough. So next steps, I would say, kind of getting you ready for a feasibility study is go seeing your top donors, can build your database as big as you can and with as much accurate data as you can, and really figure out what are you raising money for, what are your needs, and how are you going to tell that story to your donors that excites them.
Great. Awesome. Cool. Any last thoughts or takeaways about campaigns?
Um, So they sound sometimes really scary. I started off talking with big numbers, right? And that doesn't have to be a big goal for a campaign. $2 billion is a ridiculous goal. So don't think, oh, we're not going to do $1 billion. We're not going to do a capital campaign. No, even 27 million for Oklahoma State is a big goal. It's really about if your organization is in a position where you have an exciting story to tell, you have needs that are not being met with your current fundraising operation, and you have a potential donor base that will be excited about helping you grow, then there's no reason to stop thinking to not start thinking about launching into a capital campaign, because they're a lot of work, they're a lot of effort, but they're also a heck of a lot of fun. You get to have really cool donor experiences. At the end of the day, the fundraising team that was part of the building at Oklahoma State of building that church, they will know for the rest of their life, I had a part in building that church, and everything that comes out of that church, the lives that are changed, the marriages that are, celebrated, everything that happens in there, I had a part in that. It was a small part, right? We were a team, and ultimately we, prayed a lot and relied on, the strength and the faith of God to move us forward. But I had a part in that, and that's a really exciting thing. So all that to say that sometimes they can sound scary, sometimes they can sound pretty intimidating, but they're also a lot of fun, and they can take your organization to the next level.
I love it. So if you, listener, would like to dig more into the topic of capital campaigns, we did a virtual summit not too long ago, Petrus did, where we did 3 different talks about different aspects of capital campaigns, and we're making that available, the recordings of those talks, available for free. If you go to petrusdevelopment.com/141, because this is episode 141 of the Petrus Development Show, you're going to find those recordings to our Capital Campaigns Virtual Summit. It's going to talk about, is your organization ready for a campaign? Some of the different things to do prepare, which we mentioned a little bit today. We just kind of scratched the surface today. It's going to talk about, if you're doing a building project, how to manage that building project at the same time you're managing a campaign, and then how to maximize the return on investment of your campaign, how to get the most out of it. So if you want to dig into that, go to petrusdevelopment.com/141, and you'll have access to all of those talks for free.
Awesome. I remember that summit. That was fun.
It was. Another announcement coming up pretty soon here on April 24th. We have the live basic training session for Raise 24. So in the past at our Raise conferences, we've done kind of a basic training onboarding session especially for new fundraisers, to get up to speed on how all these pieces of fundraising fit together. This year we're doing it virtually. We're going to do it live, and it's only for people who have registered for the conference. So if you'd like to be able to attend that live, to ask questions, to get the most out of it, register for Raise 24 before April 24th, and you'll be given access to that. Go to petrusdevelopment.com/Raise24.
Awesome again. I love it.
Yeah, come join us in San Antonio, June 24th through 26th for the conference. Excellent. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask for future episodes of the podcast, feel free to send them in to podcast@petrusdevelopment.com. We may feature them. Like I said, we'll have Matt Bond joining on the next episode. We're going to dig into donor events, which he did a bunch of in the course of their $27 million campaign, different types of events of all different sizes. And so it'll be fun to dig into that with him.
Awesome. This is a great episode and a great follow-up. I love it.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. I hope you enjoy the nice weather down there, but avoid the pollen. And we'll see you back here again in a few weeks.
All right. Thanks, Ren.
I'm so glad that you could join us for this episode of the Petrus Development Show. Do you know anybody whose ministry needs to take their fundraising to the next level? Please pass along the show to them. And if you haven't already, take a minute and do 3 things. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And check out our website, petrusdevelopment.com. Your ministry and the kingdom need good people doing great development work, and your donors receive just as much benefit from giving as your organization does from receiving. And as it says in Luke 5, cast your nets out into the deep. Be bold and the Lord will provide. God bless, and we'll see you next time.